Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, my entitled neighbor constantly used my pool without permission. I got a restraining order against her, but she then destroyed my entire property as revenge. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. The first one starts like this. I live in a fairly decent neighborhood. Most of the houses are pretty big, complete with a lawn and a garage. However, only 2 houses on my street have swimming pools. One belongs to a rich Englishman who spends most of his days outside the country due to the nature of his work. His pool stays unfilled, the other house with the pool belongs to me and I spend every other day in it as I love swimming. I've never been stingy with my pool and I have people over on multiple occasions. Even people from my neighborhood. Most of my neighbors are amazing people, but of course every place has its Karen. Our Karen happened to stay right next door, which makes avoiding her extremely difficult. She also has 2 children, one age 10 and the other 8, who she has raised to be miniature versions of herself. I once saw the older kid pull another kid's hair. The kid who got her hair pulled was simply trying to sell lemonade to raise money for charity. When the parents complained to Karen, she just shooed them away by telling them that they should have gotten permission from everyone who lives on the street before setting up a lemonade stand. Most people on our street just make a U-turn every time they see her, and I don't blame them. I would do the same if she did not show up at my door every single day. Like I said, I'm not exactly petty when it comes to the pool and I allow other people to use it, but that does not mean she can come over every day. At one point, Karen and her 2 mini Karens used the pool more than I ever did. I would not have minded this if they were at least nice about it, but Karen treated me like a public pool receptionist and expected me to be a lifeguard every time they swam. Some days my pool would turn into a daycare center and Karen would just leave her kids and expect me to look after them for however long she is gone. I could not exactly leave the kids and go about my day because her daughters were truly the most horrid pair of children I had ever come across. They would go inside the house, make everything wet, play around with expensive objects and gifts from important people who are very close to me. They even raided the fridge once and I was just gone 5 minutes to pick up a delivery at the door. It should not have been humanly possible to eat that much that fast, but I know for a fact that they ate it all because 10 minutes later they proceeded to throw it all up in my pool. This went on for almost a month before I finally snapped. Karen came over exactly an hour before I had to leave for work and demanded I let the kids use the pool. As I began refusing, the kids went past me and into the door. They headed straight for the back door that led to the pool. Before I could go after them, Karen told me that she is going out and will be back really soon. She turned around and headed to her car immediately. I called out saying that I'll be late for work and that she cannot do this, but I heard the kids giggle. Their giggle is more of a cackle that I had grown uncomfortably familiar with, and it almost always meant that they were up to no good. I ran up to the pool and found them hunched over the edge. Upon closer inspection, I saw that they were trying to drown a large beetle in the pool. I immediately rescued the poor critter and asked them to go back to their house. They just said their mom said they could play and jumped into the pool. I was incredibly pissed off by then, but to make matters worse, I started getting calls from the office about a crisis that they needed me to handle right away. Going to shower in hopes that Karen will be back by then was a horrible mistake. The moment I stepped into the shower, I heard a loud crash and a scream from the living room. I put my clothes back on and went to check out what happened. To my horror, the TV lay broken on the floor beside the 8-year-old whose foot was now bleeding. I tried calling Karen a bunch of times, but she refused to pick up. The cut was not very deep, but I could not exactly throw out a bleeding, crying child. I waited in hopes that she would be back soon, but this woman had the audacity to show up 5 hours later. I started yelling at her the moment she came back and told her that she and her family were banned from using my pool, but she kept screaming that this was my fault. This debacle took place on the front lawn and my entire street now knew what had taken place. Knowing Karen, it was not a surprise that they were on my side. This was why multiple neighbors informed me every time Karen used my pool when I was not home. This was practically breaking and entering, and I threatened to go to the police multiple times. But she continued to do the same. This was driving me insane, but they went on to do the unthinkable. When I was at work, I got a call from one of my neighbors. He told me to check my messages immediately. To my utter disbelief, I stared at an image of the younger kid defecating in my pool while Karen just stood by in the background and did absolutely nothing to stop her kid. That was the last straw. I had never imagined that she would even stoop to this level. I went straight to the cops to file a restraining order and did not even bother going to take a look at the pool anymore, because I knew cleaning the pool would have required an exterminator. God knows what all that little devil had unleashed into my pool. She obviously didn't go down quietly and kept screaming about getting revenge during the whole ordeal with the law, but the following couple of weeks were awfully quiet. I kept my guard up during the entire duration, and I eventually came to the conclusion that she was all bark and no bite. And yes, I now know that I should have been able to figure out that, but she wasn't done yet considering everything she had already done. I was distracted because my workplace had told me that I was to go to a different country for a work-related trip. I was really excited for this and decided to focus on the bright side of life. During the 2 weeks I was away on the work trip, I was so busy that I barely had time to keep in contact with anyone from my street. I wish I did though, so I wouldn't have had to have a huge shock waiting for me back home. The second I got out of the cab from the airport, I was devastated to find that the giant sequoia tree in my backyard had been chopped down. That tree meant the world to me, and Karen had hired an illegal arborist to chop down my tree in a stupid attempt to destroy my pool. To make matters worse, the tree had not only destroyed my pool, but also a portion of my house. A restraining order clearly was not enough. If this woman had the nerve to chop down a tree that was far older than her in a desperate attempt to destroy my pool, I was going to have to destroy her. She had already made it all too easy. I got her back by suing her and her idiotic arborist friend for over $415,000. Let's see how long she can remain in the neighborhood when she is now bankrupt and despised by everybody. And yeah, ripe stars, obviously, since we are Reddit veterans, we know how expensive trees can get. Obviously, the stupid neighbor was not aware of this. Anyway, let's continue with more stories. Landlord stole my cello and illegally evicted me during the moratorium. I sued him. Everything fell apart for a lot of people in 2020, and when I became unemployed, evicted and robbed of my cello, I was a mess. I lost my job like many others, but thankfully had a decent nest egg saved up. I was able to survive for a little while, but eventually came up short on rent payment. I was a good tenant and informed my landlord of this information beforehand. I did my best to always pay my rent early, but with the hard times I had fallen on, this one time I could not make it. He was not great about responding to texts, so sometimes I had to call him to communicate properly. I even asked him if I could pay him what I had and sign a contract to give him the rest in 2 weeks, but he did not want to give me a straight answer. He even would say, "Let's not worry about this right now, and we will deal with that later." My dad told me that I need to have everything in writing, so I started insisting on speaking only through email or text. I continued to insist on the contract for that month's rent payment, and instead he tells me that he wants me to vacate the apartment instead of worrying about it. I was a little surprised and kind of upset. Also, we were in the moratorium phase of the virus lockdown. I was not going to be past due that much. I had found a new job and was waiting for my first check. I asked him to please reconsider this decision, but he said that he would prefer it if I moved out. I even sent him a letter, notice of virus impact on rent, per my friend's advice. However, he still would not budge. I'm not the type to confront someone, so I just left it alone and started the process of finding a new place. It was still early in the month, so I assumed that I had about 30 days to move out. It was not a formal eviction, and there were legal rights that I think I was owed as well, especially when I looked more into the CARES Act that Congress passed in March of 2020. The only qualification that needed to be met was the apartment I was staying in being covered by that act's policy, and as far as I know it should have been. I asked him through text if this house was exempt from the CARES Act and to explain why it was, to which I received no response. I did not hear from him for almost a week, and then suddenly he sent me an email saying that I needed to be gone from the apartment in a week. I did not have a place yet, but I was about to, only I could not move in until the beginning of the month. This was rushing things a little bit. I started busting my ass and packing up, prepared to put my things in storage and stay with a friend temporarily if I had to. Not even 5 days after this email was sent to me is even when the worst day occurred, which I'm sure you have realized was not even the week that he had asked me to move out by. I was packing and moving my belongings to a temporary storage, my dad's garage, while I stayed at a friend's house. Literally that day I had been moving boxes back and forth and had finally called it quits for that afternoon. I still had several larger items that I had not moved yet because, first of all, they are heavy and awkward and I was waiting for help moving them. One of those items, my cello, was not necessarily heavy, but I wanted to keep it at the apartment because my friend's place had the air conditioning out and it had not been repaired yet. Our state is far too hot and muggy, and the cello needs to stay in a cool, not humid environment. My cello is the most important thing in my life. I know that sounds sort of ridiculous, but truly it is. I've been playing since I was 6 years old and was currently in my final year of obtaining my fine arts in cello performance. I even had a scholarship, which was huge because my parents could not afford to help me much financially while in college. I have always assumed that the reason my cello has meant so much to me is not just because I enjoy it and I am quite talented at it, but because when I was 6 my older sister passed away in an accident. I had a really hard time with it, and to deal with the trauma, my child therapist recommended getting me into a musical instrument. The therapist really liked string music, and when I went to our sessions I would always spend a lot of time paying attention to the rise and fall of the beautiful violins and cellos. From the first moment that my hands touched the neck and bow of my cello, my life was changed forever. The next morning my friend and I went back to my apartment to pack the remainder of my belongings. I arrived to find most of my stuff on the curb and the locks on the door changed. I could not believe it, this was nightmarish. My cello was gone along with several other expensive kitchen appliances, my sofa and dining room table. I'll admit that I had an actual panic attack right then and there, and my friend had to calm me down the best she could. I was a freaking mess. I did not know what to do. I called my landlord several times and he refused to answer. I then called the police and one of them came out, but unfortunately he could not really help me since it was not my property and my landlord did not actually give me a formal eviction notice. He did on the other hand inform me that no judge in the county was signing eviction notices right now and hinted that I should probably seek some legal counsel. Without my cello, it felt like a piece of me was missing. Nearly every day for 15 years I had played my beautiful instrument. I could not even listen to music. I had such a hard time accepting this. I searched nearby pawn shops and called secondhand instrument stores and no one had seen it, but they said they would let me know. Not only did this destroy me emotionally, but I was also set back on my degree and education, ruining the plans that I had for my future in professional cello playing. This was a huge blow to everything that I had going for me at the time. It felt like my life was utterly ruined. I started gathering what evidence I could and contacted the people I thought could help me. I managed to save up and find a lawyer. About 2 agonizing months later, that dealt with tenant and landlord disputes. He informed me that I actually had a good case against this a-hole, especially with the way that 2020 has gone with rental properties and giving people a break. I had my cello appraised a few years ago and it was worth almost $10,000. Some receipts I was able to get to prove the worth of my couch and kitchen appliances. I also brought documentation to show how much I've had to spend on therapy and the written letter from my doctor stating the direct link to him robbing me and my mental health deterioration. I wanted some emotional distress compensation at this point as well. My lawyer encouraged me to go for filing within the county court for no more than $30,000. That would cover more than enough of the actual financials with the robbery, but would not cover the emotional damage. However, I was willing to accept it. My day in court was difficult and I was not sure if we were going to be successful, but my lawyer was great and supportive and told me to have faith. And I did, and it worked out. The stupid dude looked even worse from the defendant's side of things and was blubbering like an idiot. He did not even bother to get a lawyer and thought that he could self-represent. Needless to say, my attorney chewed him up and spit him out by the end of things, and the judge was happy to award me the money. Before things were over, I asked my lawyer to ask my old landlord, while he bitterly packed up his documents, if he still had my cello, and he flipped me off while storming out of the courtroom. I was awarded the $30,000 that we asked for, and I felt great, but still, I was missing my cello. My best friend and parents spent almost 2 more months looking for it, but managed to find it after posting an ad on a stolen instrument website. Who knew those were a thing, right? It was a great moment when I finally was able to take it back home and play it again. Music to my ears. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, did you ever have any material things in your life that really meant a lot to you? For me personally, it is obviously my motorcycle, but also a little stone that looks like chocolate. If you want to know why that stone is so important for me, I will tell the story at the end of the video. But anyway, now let's move on to the next story, and if you enjoyed the video so far, I would really appreciate it if you could post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled, "Remove your stuff off my property." I am not very technically minded when it comes to electric, so please bear with me and I shall explain as best as my layman's knowledge allows. The beginning. I live not far from Milla in North Queensland up in the mountains and rainforest. On my property I am blessed with a strong mountain stream that never goes dry and was perfect for a small hydroelectric setup to produce power for my house. Now, to place it on my property, I would only get a small head of water, meaning the hydro system would not be running at full capacity and produce a lot less power than it was actually capable of. To ensure I never was left dry, I instead installed 2 hydro systems, which essentially meant I could now run everything as much as I liked. To burn off excess power produced, I mounted a row of heating elements from old hot water systems on the roof of my shed. I could not feed the excess back into the grid, as apparently it is illegal to do this from hydro for some reason, but is apparently perfectly alright from solar panels. A pretty nice setup once complete, and apart from a very small amount of maintenance, I never paid a cent for power ever again. I was on very good terms with my downhill neighbor, and eventually we struck a deal to place the generators on my neighbor's property, where there would be a higher head from my weir and the turbines would run at full power. Also, they would easily provide enough electricity for both houses. So we poured a new cement slab for the generators and ran a new feed pipe from my weir to the new generator site. And by the way guys, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a weir is sort of a wall that runs beneath a river. Anyway, wired everything in and hey presto, free power all around. Everything was good for nearly a decade until my neighbor finally sold the place and moved south to be with his kids. At first the new neighbor seemed okay, he had been told about the power sharing agreement but apparently had not grasped a bit about the generators being on his property. They were down by the creek and in the forest, so it may not have been immediately obvious where they were located. Unfortunately, when he did discover them, he appeared to take it as a personal affront and came storming to my door one night. "Neighbor, why are these 2 bloody great machines on my place with a pipe coming from your place?" Me, do you mean my hydro turbines? "Neighbor, is that what they are? Why are they on my property? I don't want them here. You need to get rid of them or I will." Me, wait a minute, those turbines are where our power comes from. We cannot just rip them out. "Neighbor, "That's not my problem. I don't want your stuff on my land. You have 1 more week to move them, or else." The discussion went on some more as I tried to get him to understand why they were there and what they did, as well as the original deal to share power because of where they were. He was either too stupid or too rude to care, so I finally agreed to move them the next day. So the next morning I shut off the drive pipe, disconnected the turbines and loaded it all onto my UTE. I then went to the original site on my property and reconnected the whole mess. Of course, I had to use the original wiring setup to connect them, which only supplied my house. In any case, there was now only enough power for one place anyway, due to the lower head supplying less pressure. All good, and my place had power again by the evening. My neighbor though came home after work to a dark house and defrosting freezers. And he went mental. "Neighbor, where the hell is my power? I'm supposed to get free power on my place. You cannot do this." Me, as I repeatedly explained yesterday, the deal was that you get power in return for me being able to site the generators on your property. Now that you forced me to move them, you get nothing. In any case, they now can only supply enough power for one house because of their location, so I guess you're going to have to sort out something for yourself. The neighbor stormed off to buy a petrol generator. In the coming week he had an electrician in to do a quote to supply main power to his house, and he was not happy with that as the house had been off-grid for a decade and would need extensive modifications to get back on the grid. They would need to put a new pole in on his property at his expense, as well as a new fuse box around 15k. He then got a quote for his own hydroelectric turbine, but discovered that he did not have sufficient head on his property. The salesman suggested he talk to his uphill neighbor, me, to see if he could run a pickup pipe from that property. Guess who came to my door, cap in hand and very apologetic, to ask if I would mind putting the generators back on his place so he could have power. When I told him there was no way in hell I was going to do that, he asked if he could have permission to run a drive pipe from my weir instead. Me, gee, I don't know if I want your stuff on my land. I eventually let him do it, although I did make him sweat a bit first. However, there was a condition attached. If he ever made trouble with me again, that drive pipe was going to come out immediately. I have not had so much as a peep from him since. The next one is titled, "My Uncle, the Biggest Entitled Douche." You may remember me from yesterday's post, and yeah, I am back. The apple does not fall far from the tree. This particular story is about his father, my uncle. And by his father, OP means his cousin's father. My mom has a brother and a sister. Her sister lives with us and her brother is married with 3 kids living in a branched off part of our city. Despite only being 30 to 20 minutes away, we hardly ever hear from them unless they want something or it is the holidays. I shall abbreviate EU for Entitled Uncle. Entitled Uncle has been greedy since the womb. He was into drugs and such back in the day and would do just about anything to get them, even taking medication from family because he felt he was entitled to them. To this day, he is all about what he can take from others and has taught his kids to do the same. When my mom's parents passed years back, EU took a lot of jewelry, pawned it all and lost it. He tore their parents' bedroom upside down looking for stuff to take after the funeral service because he swore up and down that since he was their son, it was his birthright to take what he could get. My mom hid a lot of the expensive stuff beforehand and I am still holding on to my grandfather's guitar and I wanna take it with me when I move so he cannot take it. Pry it from my cold dead hands, you little douchebag. This incident happened years ago and is on the brink of happening again. My aunt had this old truck back in the day and her father, when he was still alive, bought her a new one in the early 2000s. Having no use for her old one, she decided it was best to sell it. Cue EU and all his self-entitlement. He started up with, "Give it to me, my sons can use it when they are old enough." His oldest 2 were toddlers at this time, so he planned to wait 14 plus years to put it to use? No. And he either wanted it for free or for very little on payment plans my aunt knew he could not keep up with because of his chain smoking, debt and God knows what else. My aunt told him no, he did not like that answer very much, but who was he? We had friendly neighbors across the street whom we considered family. They needed a car and were willing to pay up front in full, so my aunt sold it to them. Oh god, here we go. Entitled uncle was absolutely furious that his sister would sell her car to someone that was not the so-called family. He started saying, "I'm family and you couldn't sell it to me? I could have let my sons use it when they can drive. We are family, I should have been first." He felt entitled to it because of blood, though he was hardly ever around to help any of us when we needed it. If you were to ask me, he was not deserving of it. My aunt knew that he could not keep up with payments, and it is probably going to end up in a junkyard somewhere. She did the only logical thing and did not sell it to him. Point blank. The family she sold it to moved away and EU was upset because he knew it was gone forever. Fast forward 14 or so years, present day. The truck my grandfather bought my aunt was deteriorating and my mom got 2 new cars. One 3 years ago and she bought another last January and we have even another one. So we had 4 cars and only 3 of us and I cannot drive yet. We have neighbors across the street, the ones that visit for the holidays, and the husband got into a wreck that totaled his truck. At this point, the truck my aunt had was sitting dead in the driveway because she was driving my car and the extra one my mom had when I was little. EU came over to take our old furniture for free and his dog already ate most of it since we were getting new furniture anyway. After asking for our old rocking chairs, which he did not get, he asked my aunt to sell the truck to him for, you guessed it, his sons who cannot drive thanks to medical conditions. My aunt did not want to sell it at all because her father gave it to her and she especially did not want to sell it to him because he wants things for free because family. I mean, he literally took all our living room furniture for free and still had the nerve to ask for more. Entitled uncle started being really annoying last holidays. He would stand in our driveway inspecting the truck before saying, "Just sell it to me, I'm family, just give it." My aunt would tell him no, that it was their dad's gift to her and she would not give it to him. He got salty and resorted to begging and guilt-tripping her. "Why the hell won't you sell it to the family? If it's dad's truck, I can give it to my sons as something to remember him by. You are not using it, it's just here dead. Sell it to me, don't be so greedy, I'm family." We eventually convinced my aunt to sell it after months of prodding her. A lot of people wanted it and truly had the money for it. Our neighbor got paid by his insurance company for the wreck and said he had cash up front for the truck, whatever she asked for it. He then came and inspected it and gave her a nice chunk of change. I won't go into numbers, but we could go on 2 or 3 cruises with it alone for it. They did everything legally, passed the deed to him, so it is his and EU cannot have it whatsoever. EU has yet to find out as this was recent and we have not heard from him since Christmas. But when he does find out, holy Batman, am I going to have some stories for you. I cannot wait to see him burst into flames when he notices that the truck is now across the street and that is where it is staying. Family my ass. Someone just woke up while I was recording. Very nice. Just woke up from nap. For God's sake, no. This week getting bigger and bigger. Purr like a motorcycle. Now she already knows where to get back into her room. When she's hungry, she just goes back by herself. And of course to scratch. So yeah, some of you said that we should buy a laser pointer, but we already have that. We actually have a lot of toys. When my mom first saw this, she thought we are gonna have a baby or something like that. So many toys everywhere. But obviously a baby that would need this would be a little weird. So yeah, we just got a cat baby, not a human baby, and I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest.